This is Jason Clark, and you're listening to the Sheriff Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to an exclusive episode of The Sheriff. Guys, today I have a gentleman that I really admire, and there is a bunch of reasons for this. First off, this gentleman is a natural hockey fan, just like myself. But what he's done is he's taken it to the step where he's involved with the biggest internet site, in my opinion, for hockey fighting in today's present world, hockeyfights.com. Dan Gallant has been working in the sports data and statistics industry for 15 years, ladies and gentlemen. He's been with the Nation Network since 2017. Hockeyfights.com was created by David Singer in the 2000s, but we are going to explore the journey since then and what it has turned into. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Dan Gallant, how are you doing tonight?
Sean, it is an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast. This journey with hockeyfights.com has allowed me to meet some very interesting individuals and individuals that I don't think I would have been able to meet otherwise, and you are absolutely one of them, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Dude, I'm very happy to hear that because I'm just as excited as you. You hear me studying here. I'm stuttering because I'm excited. But Dan, honestly though, dude, like I really appreciate it when I have guys that are just as big a hockey fans as I am. Sports fans in general, it doesn't have to be hockey, but if it's hockey, it's just a cherry on top because obviously that's my main sport, right? So yep. I'm a former player, like I say to a lot of my guests, but what I'm really talking them to as is the hockey fan, is the big hockey fan. So the talks that I want to get into with you, my man, first off, is I admire you, dude. I admire the fact that you're a part of something that I had my whole career had to be a role. And you guys are pretty much like we talked about before the recording, the Bible of hockey information and hockey videos right now for hockey fights, right? And I admire that. I want to talk about your beginnings, though. I want to talk about Edmonton, Alberta, my friend, which I love as a city. I've been there a couple times. Tell me about, like, you and your family growing up in Edmonton. Like, were you born in Edmonton?
Yes, yeah. I was born and raised, grew up in the south end of Edmonton, going to a Catholic school. I still live in the neighborhood that I grew up in. I moved back since, and I still live in my neighborhood. I walk by or drive by my old elementary and junior high school every day. So I grew up here in Edmonton. Always have been an Oilers fan since the start. My journeys have taken me all around the world, and you know, I spent a few years in Halifax and had been itching ever since to get back, and I came back and started really pressing for a job with a company called Oilers Nation. At the time, it was a smaller website covering the Oilers specifically, and then they had a couple of other different websites covering the Flames, the Jets, those kinds of things. Got in there, and the rest is history. The Nation Network has taken me under their wing. I've been able to talk a lot of hockey and a lot of sports with a lot of people, hosting events in person. I've been to Germany for hockey games and been able to interact with German hockey fans, and then we brought them back to Edmonton since then. It's just it's an absolute passion play, and I love hearing your passion come through the microphone as well. Just to be a fan of the game, like you said, and it's always been my contention that you meet anybody on the street and they're a hockey fan, you're already a friend and you didn't even know it. Because you share a commonality, you share a common journey. Even if you don't necessarily agree on anything about the game that you both know and love, you still have an opinion, you still have something you can connect with them, even if you don't even speak the same language.
Absolutely, brother. And thank you for sharing that, because I really, really appreciate that insight from a fellow super fan like myself. Yes. So now, dude, because you just mentioned it, let's get right into it then. Tell me about the Nation Network. Tell me about what you guys do. I know that it was 2017 that you started, working there. But tell me what the main things you guys do and what your goals are.
Well, I alluded to it earlier that the Nation Network was born out of Oiler fans and a strong desire to get Ryan Smith to come back to the city. So they actually created a website called Bring Ryan Home, and they tried to bring Ryan Smith back, and that was the passion. And then they realized that they could make some money selling some advertising on a website to talk about their favorite hockey team, and the rest just kind of exploded from there. They created Oilers Nation and became a real stalwart in this city as a kind of the voice of the fans. Too often with the media, they are towing the team line, and the Edmonton Oilers have been one of the worst franchises for a long stretch of time. And Oilers Nation was one of the only websites around that wasn't blowing smoke up your butt about how good the Oilers could be. The reality was the Oilers stunk, and they talked about it and how much that sucked. And so I really respected that, and I admired that watching from afar. And the Nation Network has just grown from there. There's now 7 team sites: the Wings, the Leafs, the Jets, the Oilers, the Flames, the Canucks. I think I'm missing one in there.
All the Canadian teams?
Almost all the Canadian teams. Montreal and Ottawa have a little bit of en français issues, and we're not able to do that here. So so we're working on those. But yeah, all the Canadian teams plus the Wings, and then we have hockeyfights.com. We have puckpedia.com, which is a cap resource website, and then dailyfaceoff.com, which is kind of the big flagship now with Frank Saravalli and that team over there running the show. So a company that started based off of the trade of Ryan Smith turned into a company that this last year was purchased for $13 million by a company out of Toronto. So a pretty incredible story to be a part of. A lot of fun to watch an Edmonton-based company do the work that we've been able to do, and we're only going up from here. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to talk about a website like hockeyfights.com, because you're right. Hockeyfights.com is the database. It is the warehouse that houses all of these fights of guys like yourself that don't get highlight reels on NHL.com anymore, that don't show up on their team websites anymore because they're gone. They're out of the limelight. But on hockeyfights.com, they will always have a home, and you'll always have a place to come and see the way that hockey was and the way that hockey is now. And that may vary, your opinion based on how you look at the game that is right now.
Absolutely, dude. And as you could see, dude, I'm quiet, but it's only because I'm at the edge of my seat here, because
100%.
I'm a big fan of the database sites, and your site has always been at the top, in my opinion. And we discussed before the recording again, dude, I had to say to you, I have to admit, it wasn't the only site. Dropyourgloves.com was the site that I would also frequent. And I'll tell you when. It was when I played in the LNAH, when I was fighting 3 to 4 times a week, and I wanted to see what the fans thought of my fights. I wanted to see how well I was doing in the public eye. So what did I turn to? Hockeyfights.com and dropyourgloves.com, okay?
100%.
Now, dropyourgloves.com obviously couldn't hang, right? You guys are the Bible for hockey fight database, in my opinion. And I appreciate you guys so much. And there's a few reasons here, Dan. One reason is you're keeping the dream alive. You guys are keeping the chatter. You guys are keeping the talk, the views, the passion. Dude, if unless there's things, and we're going to talk about it later in the episode, unless there's things that are done, that's going to be gone from our game in the very near future. And you guys are part of the people that are keeping it alive right now. What's your opinion on that?
Well, and you mentioned it, and it's the competitive side in me, the competitor that I'm always going to be, wasn't terribly upset that Drop Your Gloves got or took its leave. We don't really know anything as to what happened there, but at the same time, it's sad to me, and as a hockey fan, when any kind of a database just goes down with no explanation, no reason, and no real attempt to save it. There's been efforts since then to try and revive, to try and create a little bit more. And we're always encouraging that stuff because, again, like I said, outside of my competitive nature, you always there's nothing wrong with having more and more conversations and more databases to put that stuff together. We would love to be able to see more and more come back, and like you said, be able to create that conversation, because what Hockey Fights has been able to do, and one of the things that I've been able to do is we raised our Instagram account from a 30,000 follower Instagram account to a 250,000 follower Instagram account.
I saw that,
which is incredible. It's been incredible growth, but what's really neat is that we've been able to, like you said, drive that conversation around the big hits that are happening more and more often, and the blindside hits, the stuff that in the back in the day, Sean McMorrow would have you answer for, doesn't have that same response anymore. Now, I do think that there is a shift in place, and I think you're starting to see a lot of teams carrying guys that don't necessarily have the same level of skill that their other components do have. You look at like somebody like Ryan Reeves, but there is that element still of the sheriff. There is that element still of policing the game. And I think that with teams that are using that for maybe just a pest role instead of an enforcer type role, they are also seeing the struggles and the issues that can cause. You look at a guy like Matthew Tkachuk, who was absolutely running this league when it came to pissing people off, but he's had to scale it back because there's nobody left on the team to want to answer the bell for the guy. And the Calgary Flames don't want Matthew Tkachuk off the ice for 5 minutes at a time, so they need somebody that's willing to take that spot up. So yeah, to me, it's continuing the conversation, and then it's driving to try and fix the game for the people that aren't necessarily enjoying it as much as other people have in the past.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And now that we're actually now that you brought that up, I'm going to get right into a talking point that I was going to save for later.
Perfect.
So, all right. So now here's the thing. I believe that unless action of great ideas that are brought to a table where former players, current players, executives, it has to be like a pretty big round table, because the point that everyone has to agree to is that our game decided to go down a path where we were going to embrace the skill and speed. I believe that was the intention from the 2004-2005 lockout rules that started, where before you could hook a guy a little bit, as long as it wasn't that bad, the ref wasn't calling it. Now, as soon as contact's made, boom, penalty. So what does that do? That eliminates the bigger, slower player, which typically was a role guy, was a checker, typically, right? Yeah. So now that player is now eliminated, and the player that's in that spot is a faster, better skater, okay? So as a result, along with other things that we talked about, like we said, man, after that year, in the AHL, for example, mandatory visors. So I remember I'm going into my fourth year pro. My third year pro was the lockout year. My fourth year pro, me and Brandon Sugden are like pretty much in our primes. And he's doing interviews saying, man, I'm really going to hurt my hand this year. I'm not looking forward to, I break my hand a couple times a year already. Now I'm going to cut it up and have it all stitched up by punching a guy's visor, because the league made it harder and harder for guys to do the job. Harder and harder, bigger of a team risk. Oh, the instigator, that was years before, but, you have a wild guy like Frank Bialowas running around and boom, big hit, grabs someone, but the ref gives him the instigator. Now he's a liability to his team, and the coach has to think, man, do I put Frank in next game? I don't know, man. Like, the refs are picking on him, so can I take that risk now? Like, that's the way the game was going, right?
Yep.
So now we're at a point where we have a fast, skilled game, okay? But we all have to agree that the ratings absolutely stink in the USA. We are laughable compared to the other sports in the Big Four. I have some ideas that we can change the game back and get some of the rough stuff back with education, Dan, and insurance.
Yep.
Education, because everyone's educated now. Everybody knows about the head injuries. Everybody knows about this. Everyone knows about that. So because of that, every NHL team has implemented a tough guy coach, someone to oversee the guys that do the role. Once you have your fifth fighting major, you qualify for a special type of insurance which ensures that you're not going to be 20 years down the road having head problems and don't know what to do and want to commit suicide, because you're going to be protected with education and insurance. Players are going to be more willing to do the role because they know they're going to be protected. Guys are a little bit more prima donna these days. Well, now they know that this is going to be implemented. They're going to be more likely to do it. If there's a marketing team behind it, that the fans know that, man, every NHL team is now going to have a role guy that's being overseen and they're going to be insured. Man, this is like a UFC NHL. I'm in. The arenas start getting packed. The ratings go up. Everybody's happy. Drop your gloves. Hockeyfight.com. Hockeyfights.com is legendary because you guys were part of the process to bring it back. What do you think of my idea, Dan?
I mean, I love it. My communication has always been with the guys, and one of the things that I really enjoy working with Hockey Fights and having the social media presence that we do is that I'm able to interact with you guys a lot, the enforcers, the people that, again, you know, you lose the taglines because you guys didn't have the highlight reel goals, but to some fans you had highlight real lives, and so one of the things I always make sure to say to everybody is thank you for sacrificing what you did for your teammates and for the fans. And to me, that's the biggest thing, is that there is people in this world that are willing to sacrifice and accept some risks later in life to do what they love now. You know, I mean, you look at even myself, you know, I love this job, but you know, sometimes in this sports statistics and the sports industry, it's been tough to go home at the end of the night and know that you don't necessarily have everything figured out money wise because you're just doing what you love, right? And so I recognize and I always try to let guys, you know that the sacrifice and the stuff that they do and they did knowingly, like you said, now it's knowing that you're going out there. Ryan Reeves goes out there and he knows that the next punch could cause something, you know, when he's 45, that could be an issue. Sean McMorrow, you fought more in one league than some guys have fought in their entire lifetimes. And you did it for the love of the game and the love of your teammates. And that kind of stuff, you're right. It does need to be an option or a choice that these guys can make for themselves, with the understanding that their team, if their team wants them to play that role, that their team also has their back once the game is over and once they've walked out the door, and that team's season continues on, but those guys aren't left behind.
Exactly, dude. And I just think that I've had a lot of ex-tough guys on my show, right? Yeah. And I appreciate it so much because they're all so similar in certain ways, like their kindness, their humbleness, their the way that they talk. It's almost like they just expect to just go into the war before their buddies, just because maybe they were born bigger or born with bigger hands, like Ryan Vandenbush, who's got mitts, right? Yeah. So like some of them just feel like they just have to do it. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that so much. And what I say to them is like, don't you feel that you weren't protected when you played? Like pretty much the NHL, AHL, East Coast, the way those guys looked at the tough guys, man, in the 90s and the 2000s was, okay, so we need to sign a guy that is mentally and physically tough enough that he can take on the toughest guy on every other team. He can deal with not playing that much. He can deal with having to be like an assistant coach because we're going to rely on him to talk to certain guys. And we need him to do all of these things with no help and no guidance. But we're going to have a goalie coach. We're going to have a face-off coach. We're going to have a strength and conditioning coach. We're going to have about 6 associate coaches that just help the video coach and the power play. But we're going to have nobody helping those guys that sell the most tickets, that sell the most jerseys, and that protect all our stars. Like, that's what I have a problem with.
Well, and to your point too, and it's something that I know that we've been given more access as fans, and so I don't know if it's necessarily not always been this way, but we've been given a glimpse into a lot of practices where I've seen Ryan Reeves, Colton Orr, Adam McQuaid before he walked away. Those guys are all taking time to teach their teammates how to fight. And you're absolutely right. Some of those guys you watch, like for instance, a guy in the league right now, Michael Pizzata, who I adore. He's got so much fire in his game, but boy, oh boy, does that boy need some help. Just with like that initial engagement in his fights. That you're right. If he had a coach on his team, if he had a George the Rock, that's the Montreal Canadiens enforcer coach or whatever, like or consultant, then yeah, it's a different conversation altogether. And you're not having these conversations where it's like that guy doesn't seem to know what he's doing out there, and it's not necessarily as dangerous to them and to their opponents as well.
But just like the what frustrates me the most, Dan, is the fact that, I was pretty much an AHL guy. Once I was done with that, I wanted to see what was across the pond. And then, of course, I wanted to embrace the Quebec League because they needed my type of player the most out of any other pro league, right?
100%.
But I got a sniff of the NHL. I got to see what it's like up there. I played a lot of preseason and got to really get to see and observe the American Hockey League level. And brother, at those levels, I'm telling you, man, there's so many different coaches to help the players, especially like when I first started. Like I first started 2002 was my rookie year, right? So we're talking early 2000s from what I'm judging. And I'm telling you, the amount of coaches that the NHL and AHL levels have, it was a shame that they didn't have someone to oversee the guys that were doing the role. Like I look at the Buffalo Sabre organization, they had two legitimate tough guys on their roster, usually in the lineup, all the way until about maybe 2012, 2013, whenever Eric Bolton and Andrew Peters things split up. Whenever that happened, that was the end of it. But all the way, man, there was always two guys. There's only two goalies, man. There's only two centers that are on the power play. There's like that was a big role. The Buffalo Odd used to be so packed and it used to get so loud when there was a fight. The Sabres had Barnaby, May, and Rob Ray. When they had those three guys, that's when the role was overly like an asset to some of the NHL teams. Edmonton had a time where they were super tough too. Philly, all these guys
Minnesota,
put in all this work with no oversight. And that's what I would want to change. I would want to see if guys are going to do the role, someone taking care of them, someone learning them, teaching them how to hold their hand so they don't break their hand, how to break their fall a little bit better, how to know if your bell's rung, how to really deal with that.
How to protect your opponent. Yeah. 100%. That's like, honestly, protecting your opponent is such an underrated thing that so often people will watch a fight and they'll be like, man, what a great catch that was by so-and-so. And it's like, yeah, that's part of the game. That's part of the fight is being able to turn off the red once you've finished the job and get back to being a human again. And that's, So like, I love hearing former guys that have played in the show come up with these ideas. What kills me is the next step is having you have that conversation, and where does that go? It's always the issue is that you guys have these ideas, but you no longer wear a jersey on your chest that they want to listen to, so you're not worth listening to. It's sickening to watch from my own personal opinion. That's not hockey fights. That's not anything. That's just me saying that. But yeah, I mean, you come with these great ideas, and yeah, sure, they're not all going to be, easily implemented. And maybe it takes one team that just says, you know what? Yeah, we're going to go and sign Sean McMorrow to be the coach, the enforcer coach, or the enforcer consultant for the team to be able to help out some young guys. But yeah, it's a great point by you that here we are. We've seen all these little subtle changes, the not being able to take off your helmet rule, like you said, the visors, everything kind of has been a microtransaction against fighting, but there's never been something to just make it safer for the guys that are doing it. You can acknowledge all you want, the issues that you have after the game and that the issues that some of these guys have had after the game, but you can't sit here and say, well, it's a rule in the game without supporting these guys on the other hand.
Exactly. So Dan, and I appreciate you giving that insight. Okay, so now I'm gonna get something. Now that was getting a little serious.
The heavy stuff.
Now things are gonna lighten up a little bit. I'm gonna get this something that's really fun. Okay, so I grew up in Scarborough, Ontario, suburb of Toronto. So I'm a Toronto boy.
Yeah.
You yourself, born and bred in Edmonton, right?
Yes.
2 historical franchises, NHL teams, great spots. Now, I obviously, with you having the position that you have with hockeyfights.com, with me, having to do the role, which I love, but also main reason to play at the highest levels, like that's something that I had to do, right? So me and you both it's fair to say, are guys that really took to hockey fighting, really enjoyed it probably from a younger age. Now, here's the interesting thing. I want to know, I'm going to tell you how fighting was introduced to me as a kid watching it. And I'm going to give you a little insight of how I was introduced to it. Then I want you to tell me about you. So I'll give you some time that you can think about yours. Okay, so for me, bro, I'm thinking I'm like maybe 8, 9 years old. Okay, the first time I really start watching an NHL hockey game, Toronto Maple Leafs, right?
Nice.
So I'm a kid. Now I see a hockey fight. I'm 9 years old, dude, okay? So what I remember is being excited. And the reason why I was excited is because I was like, wow, these guys are really serious about this game. They're fighting. They must be the guys that care the most about their teams. I swear to God, man, I remember. That's what I thought. No one was there, and it may have been different if like maybe I had an uncle or like an older brother or someone right beside me being like, okay, Sean, now what that is blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Then I would have had a different perspective from whatever they told me. But that was my thought on it. So now I develop into this Toronto Maple Leaf fan. And I'm like, man, these guys that they put it all on the line for their teams. They care the most. Those are the big characters. Those are going to be my favorite players. Yeah. So I'm going through Ken Baumgartner, Wendell Clark, Robbie Pearson, Warren Reichel, Nick Kyprios, Ty Domi. Listen to this one. Sergio Momesso.
Nice.
Sean Craighead, Chris King, Jason Smith, Wade Belak, Shane Corson, Dave Manson, Owen Nolan, Nathan Parrott, Colton Orr. I can't go any further than that. I said Wade Belak. Can't go any further than that because Colton Orr is my age and that's as young as I'm going to get. Okay, anyone younger than that, I apologize. But those are the guys that I grew up idolizing as my heroes. Yeah, Wendell Clark's on that list. As Toronto Maple Leaf tough guys, right? Nice. Now, for Edmonton, before you get into your story, for me, well, okay, you know what? We'll save that till you're done. How you, the managing editor of hockeyfights.com, how were you introduced to hockey fighting as a kid?
Well, Sean, when I was growing up, my parents were their fans. My mom always had a soft spot for Dave Semenko. So I was always, I think I was always kind of taught by her to respect the enforcer. But I didn't really get into my first ever hockey memory was the 92 Stanley Cup Finals, watching it on TV. And then my family, we were never able to really get to games, and we didn't even really have, better than basic television kind of with the rabbit ears. So I didn't get to watch much, but I do remember my first ever hockey game was a Sharks Oilers preseason game, and Igor Ulanov tried to kill a guy. He got so mad, he got so frustrated with a Sharks player that he two-handed him with a stick behind the net and got an intent to injure penalty. And then right after that, Jason Arnott skated to center ice and flipped off the Sharks, and I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked at like the animosity that you could have for a game where like half of the guys were nobody that I'd ever recognized in my life as a kid, right? I recognized Jason Arnott and I recognized Igor Ulanov because I'd seen them play the year before. And so I was hooked from there on in. And then, like you said, when it comes to being an Oilers fan, that those 90s teams into the 2000s, just an absolute meat grinder of a team, right? Never really that much talent to go around, but tons of spirit and tons of gumption. And when we got George the Rock, I was in love. I like there's something special about almost every enforcer I've ever spoken to, and it's just this there's this fire within you guys that I don't you don't see it in other people. And so for me with George here's this gentle giant, this guy that you've seen around town and is a radio host on local radio on Power 92. He's everything. And then he goes out and he just muffs guys. Just muffs them. And then is just normal and kind afterwards. So I love the element of the policing. I love the element of feeling like, my guy has been wronged. The referee didn't see it. So here's how we're going to fix it. And so I think that there's just kind of like a very basic like understanding and acceptance that we have when we're young of that. But then for me, I kind of got away from it. Admittedly, I wasn't a big fan of fighting in the 2000s. I was on board with the whole, let's go to talent. Let's do that.
Yeah.
But then you start to see the Sidney Crosbys of the world, like legitimately, I think hockey fans were robbed of a lot of Sidney Crosby's good years because of he's getting run around. Now, does an enforcer fix that? Maybe not. But like you watch these guys' careers get ended by these dirty hits and these nasty hits, these gnarly things, and there's no answer for it anymore. For me as a kid, you watch a lot of things go wrong in the world and not a lot of answers for them. In hockey, bad things happen and a response is therein. So yeah, we have such a similar kind of build up there. But then, like I said, I diverted away. And when I get back to hockey fights and I'm able to talk to these guys and actually just really be able to have conversations, I've been challenged on a lot of the ways that I look at things. I really did believe the safety hype around it, but then you start to understand that people are allowed to make their own choices, and they're allowed to understand the facts and the dangers and the risks that they're doing, and that they still do it is even more impressive to me. So yeah, I don't know, it's a love affair that you just it goes through stages, but it's always there, and it's always such a respect thing for me.
Yeah, dude, and thank you for sharing that kind of stuff. Because
sorry to ramble on.
No, bro, I love it. I love it, and the listeners love it. And this is what we like to hear. This is what we like to talk about, man. And one thing that I'm curious about, because I mean, George LaRock, there's not. I'm trying to see like another player that could be compared to George LaRock.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of one, man, because that there just isn't. So
no.
What I'm curious is, you being such an Oilers fan, now when George LaRock was coming up, like when he was Hamilton Bulldogs or wherever the team was that was the affiliate, what was the excitement like for Oilers Nation, knowing that you guys are gonna get a heavyweight champion?
Yeah,
that's a polite guy to boot.
Well, and that's the thing, and so I think when it comes to George is like, and just the reality with a lot of enforcers is there's not a lot of talk about it until they get there. And then it's like, oh shit, like you get some of those media types. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
Yeah. No, you're good, buddy. Okay, you're good.
So for some of the media types, like they get wind of LaRock, and of course we didn't have the internet back then, so you're just reading articles that are talking about this kid that is an absolute monster, and they don't have much more than that. But then as time starts rolling on, you get the information, and then you just start seeing him play. And when George was on the ice, I don't know, there's a different swagger about every team he's played for, even in the years when he was slowing down. When a team has a guy on the ice that they know is going to keep the other team honest, it's just a different feeling hockey game. And you still see it to this day as a fan of the game. But yeah, with George's, the hype is real, and it's real scary. Like when you think about being another enforcer on another team, God forbid, like that's the thing too when I talk to guys is just hearing, you know, that fear, that real guttural reality fear is that you're going to get punched and it's going to hurt. And so yeah, for a guy like George's, he was the nuclear deterrent, and it made you feel like your team was invincible.
Now, it must have been different from, obviously, when he first came into the league, you know, he had to make a name for himself. Like, I've had him as a special guest on this show, so I was able to pick his brain a little bit about this, right?
Beautiful
He's such a
mind.
nice guy.
Beautiful mind.
Yeah, smiling the whole time.
Yep.
Just the whole insight about why he'd be smiling in that square off. Like, just hearing that from him, like not just reading it in a book, but hearing him explain the mental aspect of it. Just the fact that how hard he had to work to get the reputation. Then he started being recognized as the guy. So then then there was a point where he had gotten that respect. So now he would get more room and he'd be able to actually put more points on the board because of it. Isn't that amazing though, how that works?
It is. It really is. And it's, you think about, you know, with the progression of his career, especially in Edmonton, you know, and then Bugard came along, right? And then it was ding dong, like, you know, we got a war every single time those two teams came together. And that was, again, another shift in the league where, like you said, all of a sudden Minnesota's the team that doesn't have to worry about anybody doing anything in and around that arena. So,
and then who was the other guy with Bugard at that time? Was it Matt Johnson? There was another huge human being on Bugard's line.
John Scott was later on towards
not John Scott,
end,
like
before him. I think you're thinking of Johnson. That's
okay, because I just remember, bro, when Bugard was there, that his other winger was like 6'5", 6'6". Bugard is 6'8", 6'9".
And it's like you said about the Sabres, same kind of idea with the Wild when they first got going as a franchise. I think they recognized the value in having those two guys so that, you know, Derek goes down, the other guy's ready to go for the next one. Like it's legitimately scary when you look back at those lineups now, when you think of what an enforcer has become to this day. So yeah, it's the LaRock Bugard matchups give me tingles thinking about them now, you know, and we're 15, 20 years removed from it. So that's crazy.
Dude, it was they were main events, heavyweight main events.
Yeah.
There would be an excitement. You know, I don't know what percentage we can say of the people in that arena, but there'd be a pretty high percentage of people that had anxiety and excitement at the same time because they knew the Boogeyman and LaRock were going to go.
Well, to me, it's like the baseball home run hitters, right? You know, you got Barry Bonds coming to town. You know, you're going to see a few dingers, and that's exciting. But they're also, you know, it's also bad news for your team. But like you said, there's just a buzz. There's a buzz about it. You know, the league tries to sell hat tricks now, and they try to sell, you know, the shootouts and the overtimes and that kind of thing. But back then it was selling toughness, and it was selling, you know, the face punching as a part of the game, not necessarily the main event, but a part of it was that element of toughness.
Definitely, buddy. So like another thing that I'm curious about is when Bugard and LaRock would be in Edmonton, would you see any Bugard jerseys? Like, or was it overwhelming support for George's?
It was for sure here in Edmonton. Edmonton has always kind of had that like we're very much the home team kind of city. More recently, some of the Canadian teams have infiltrated the city quite a bit. When the Leafs show up, it's a very Leaf pro crowd kind of thing. But for the most part, yeah, I can't imagine. And I honestly, in the old Coliseum / Skyreach Center / whatever it was called at the time, I wouldn't have wanted to be an opposing fan. The confines were pretty close, and I have always noticed that there's a certain amount of arrogance about a fan base that has a couple of good enforcers on their team that they think that they can get a little bit rougher too. I've seen some fights and some arguments in the stands at games like that, but yeah, I don't know if you'd see many Bugard jerseys. I think people respected him here, but we were all LaRock fans for sure.
Oh yeah. And like just to add to what you just said, everyone's a little bit taller and a little bit bigger when George Laraque is in the lineup, though, right? And it extends right to the seats in the
course
stand.
it does. Of course it does. You like, there's no question about it. As a fan, you can lose the hockey game and still win on some nights because George Laraque dummied the other guy on the other team, or Steve McIntyre had a huge fight. Yeah. And that's exactly it. So, I mean, when I was a junior hockey fan, I didn't even touch on this when I was talking earlier, but I did get to go see quite a few Halifax Mooseheads games, and I remember more than a few times yelling out, "We paid for blood," because your team's getting pumped 7-1, and all of a sudden the brawls started and the fight started, and that was the good old QMJHL, of course.
Yes, buddy. So now I want to jump back to hockeyfights.com.
Yes.
So now I'm intrigued with how this was. So the gentleman David Singer, who created the website, he obviously, I mean, just the name alone is golden, right?
Yeah.
So he has this site. You know, it's a database. I'm assuming it was along the same lines of after you guys had taken it over, kind of, right? And it was an idea anyway, a certain idea. Yeah. And you guys took it over in the 2010s, around like 2014, 2015, and it absolutely blew up, bro. Absolutely exploded. Explain that movement there once you guys started getting really, really big, like, and then knowing that you can go to the next level.
Well, yeah. So it's hard not to talk about David Singer with just like absolutely like rose-colored glasses, just because he did create this wonderful thing that I'm very like, I'm always very honored and humbled to be able to take over and be able to have these conversations with you. Like, again, you know, who am I other than the guy that runs hockeyfights.com? And so if not for David and the team of guys that he's created, that assembled all these videos, that kind of gets slipped under the rug, I think, a lot of the time, is that David had an incredible team of volunteers often, and some guys that he ended up being able to pay a little bit to be able to create this database that we now know and love and we take care of. I'm just always going to be in debt to David. David created hockeyfights.com because he wanted to know who was winning and losing these fights, and there was nowhere that was talking about it. So he said, I might as well fill in that niche. And it was created basically as a forum initially, and then it's just kind of exploded from there with the invention of YouTube and the ability to port those onto the website. It's just absolutely cratered from there. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about David and the team there. I still am lucky enough to work with one of the team members, Chili. He and I are the two people that are uploading the videos all the time on the site. But yeah, it's such an absolute pleasure to be a part of. And with the Nation Network, I feel comfortable in telling everybody that this site is going to be around forever, and there will always be a home for fights because the Nation Network believes so wholeheartedly in this and in having this repository. There we go. To have this repository of fights put together so that these guys will always have a place to come home to. That's important to us. So yeah, it's an absolute honor. It's an absolute pleasure, and I just enjoy every minute of it.
Awesome. So now here's a curiosity question for you. Now the website, as it goes to players, like, okay, let's say like a player like Sean Avery, for example, very outspoken guy. Have you guys gotten like, you know, contacted by certain players because they didn't like maybe the angle of a video, or like, I don't know, like, has there been any type of interactions with some of the guys?
Well, my first ever complaint that I received from an NHL player was from Ryan Reeves himself.
Was it?
He was not happy because we didn't include him in a summer project that I did of the best current fighter or something like that. So that's as much, I think, feedback as we get from those players. It's usually a bio issue or a fight isn't displaying properly, that kind of thing. And some guys take a lot of pride in their profile page, and we respect that, and we appreciate that they do keep us honest. But for the most part, the players are usually just really appreciative of getting that platform and getting the ability to still be talked about and admired. and some of the more current guys were able to kind of riff back and forth and laugh about, and I can't, like Liam O'Brien is a good example of a guy that every once in a while he'll just kind of throw a little joke about his fight into the messages or whatever. But for the most part, the guys are just, again, they're just really appreciative of it. And then here we are, we're very appreciative of them. And so it's a very mutual, respectful conversation that we're able to have with them.
Yeah. So now for the current guys right now, and thank you for sharing that. For the current guys right now, like, obviously, it's like night and day from watching hockey 15, 20 years ago, obviously, right? But we have to appreciate what we do have. What I'm noticing the most, and I'm asking you because obviously you're the database guy. Now, I believe that the kid in Colorado, is it McQuaid? What's his name? McQuaid. Yeah. To me, he seems right now the most
McDermott
guy.
I don't know
why. McDermott.
McDermott.
He seems to me, in my opinion, from what I've seen this year, he's causing the most damage, right? But now let me ask you this. The little kid in Detroit, Giovanni, is like, it seems like I'm watching highlights. It seems like he's fought every single game in the last 3 weeks. What's going on with that kid? Has he fought a lot in the last month?
Yeah, in this season alone, we've seen the uptick of a lot of guys that have just kind of come out of the woodwork and been able to establish themselves on teams. Some guys have been beneficiaries of the COVID protocols, where players are having to step out all the time. I was really excited to see the taxi squad come upon because, again, that gives an opportunity to a guy in the ECHL or the AHL that maybe they wouldn't have got otherwise. I love to see that kind of stuff. But yeah, when you talk about the most viewed fighters this year and the most fighting majors, it's Liam O'Brien, Tanner Janot, Mark Borowiecki, Brendan Lemieux, and Giovanni Smith. I would say that Borowiecki and Brendan Lemieux are names that people would probably recognize these days.
Yeah.
But for lack of, maybe coming to hockeyfights.com not enough, you wouldn't know a Tanner Jeanette or a Liam O'Brien or, like you said, a Giovanni Smith who has 7 fights this year. But guys like Keegan Kolsar, Dakota Joshua, Curtis Gabriel, there is a young batch of players that are coming along that, yes, they're not the most skilled guys necessarily. They're not going to play in top 6 minutes, but they're not the liability that some guys have been in the past, right? And we spoke about it earlier. They're character guys now. You look at a guy like Curtis Gabriel. He's one of the most outspoken players about LGBTQ plus 2 rights. And you look at a guy like Jordan Greenway or why is the name escaping me right now, for the ADH or HDA, the Hockey Diversity Alliance. Anyways, there's so many guys that are active right now that
the kid in
are
Minnesota
doing the right
for the HDA.
Yes, yeah.
I'm having a brain freeze.
Dumba. There we go.
Dumba. Matt Dumba.
Dumba's dropped the gloves too, right? And so you see with these guys, there's some smart young players coming up that are willing to drop the gloves. Maybe not at the same Sean McMorrow levels, but they are willing to do it. And so the future is bright with those guys. We just got to get those numbers up, right? Giovanni Smith, you and I saying he's fought a bunch. He's only fought 7 times. We'd like to see that go, to double digits. But again, that is the game that they're playing. That is the role that they're playing. And fights now are very situational, right? It's you don't see a lot of fights in tie games. It's not usually that, or it's a response to a hit that was borderline questionable kind of thing. So yeah, I'm excited for the future. I love that you're recognizing it, and I hope other people are too. That there's an upswell of maybe not the heavyweights, but there's still going to be some middleweight and some good fighters coming along.
Yes, buddy. So I just want to add to a couple of the names. Curtis Gabriel, I'm a huge fan. We're a huge fan of him on the show. He was also a special guest early on in our podcast. So man, I've been following him so closely. Me and Danny are, we've developed like somewhat of a friendship with him. And man, was I ever happy to see him get traded to Chicago, because at first they advertised it like it was just some like AHL transaction. But man, the Hawks traded for him, man. They want him up there.
Absolutely.
And Curtis, man, like last year on San Jose, man, did that guy ever try so hard to put his name on the map, and he did the best he could. He did an incredible job. He was kind of being held back a bit, man. Like he tried to like get things going in warm-ups and stuff like that. And man, he didn't tell me any of this stuff, but I know that the NHL had a talk with the Sharks. And after they had a talk with the Sharks, Curtis just happened to be a healthy scratch the next 9 games, right? So here's a guy that's trying to be a big character, that's trying to go out of his way. Yeah, he's going to give a cross check to, I think it's the same gentleman that's on Colorado this year. He was on LA.
Oh, McDermott,
Yeah. He's going to cross check McDermott. Say, yeah, man, keep your head up today. Yeah. Maybe give him a warning. Maybe give him a little fine. Don't suspend the guy. Come on, man. He's just stirring things up. That's how the rivalries used to get built up back in the day. You know, oh, what happened last game? I wonder what's going to happen this game. Like, we miss that, man. I know you miss it too. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a part of our conversation. It's something that we try to do. I try to take notes anytime I see, any kind of animosity towards the end of a game, but nothing happens, nothing comes of it. I write that down because the next time that they play, I'm hoping that something's going to happen. But all too often these days, it just kind of fizzles out. It's like they hash it out over the DMs, and when the next game comes along, they've forgotten about it. So I a guy like Curtis Gabriel, I've really tried to get behind, just because there's a guy that, again, like you said, is comfortable speaking up and speaking his truth and trying to defend others, because though you guys, the enforcers, are the ones that should be the ones that are driving the culture change in this sport. Yeah. The ones that stand up and say, you know what? No, that wasn't right. You shouldn't be talking like that. And if you have a problem with it, come talk to me. Like that's a real conversation that somebody can have. And that's always been the thing. You look at a guy like Brad Marchand. We talked about Sean Avery earlier. Guys that have had to have that talk with a leader on their team, those leaders are dissipating. Those leaders are disappearing and are fewer and farther between. You need guys like Curtis Gabriel, who are just character dudes that are going to keep that locker room light, but also keep it honest, right? And if there's something wrong, I trust that Curtis Gabriel is going to speak up and say something. I don't necessarily feel that comfortable with other players, and that's not necessarily their fault either. But like you said, when a Curtis Gabriel feels like he can't play the game of hockey and talk the way that he talks, that's a scary and frustrating thing for me to see.
Yes, dude. So I know you feel the same way. Huge shout out to Curtis Gabriel. We're big supporters over here with 100%. Curtis Gabriel, and we're hoping to see more players like Curtis Gabriel. We want young players that are listening to the show to look up to guys like Curtis Gabriel for what he does on and off the ice, right?
Exactly. On and off the ice, it's important.
That's it, buddy. So, dude, I want to kind of reiterate to all the listeners with hockeyfights.com, all the different platforms you on. Like, now I'm a follower on Instagram. I saw that huge number that you referred to earlier, and I was like, wow, have these guys ever built this up to a good spot right now? I was like, dude, like, I'm not saying I was too surprised, because you guys are huge. But, man, I guess I was more proud of you guys. Like, wow, that's impressive. Like,
thanks, man.
Type numbers, man.
Hey, I always have joked. I've always been a person to kind of give myself goals that are a little bit more lofty. And for the last 2 years, I've been joking that I'm coming after the Florida Panthers on Instagram, because the Florida Panthers have 288,000 followers. Oh, wow. So we're only about 30K back of them. I'm pushing for it. We're going to hopefully catch them by the end of the year and have a laugh about it, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, it is fascinating for me to see something that everybody says is so unpopular and is so dangerous and is such a liability. Well, 255,000 people follow us on Instagram. Almost 200,000 follow us on Facebook, and we have 67,000 to boot on Twitter. So it's social media, of course, is a a different animal and a beast altogether. But it is a real pleasure for us to be able to interact with as many people as we can, and again, to be able to use that platform to give guys that deserve the platform the shot to be able to talk about themselves and be celebrated still.
Yes, dude, and I'm a huge supporter in what you just said, and we're going to get that number past the Florida Panthers. So let's say it again, listeners. You hit back on your phone, get on Instagram while you're listening to this on Spotify, and you're going to go to Instagram, and what are we putting in? Hockey Fights, right?
At Hockey Fights on every platform except for TikTok. We're at hockeyfights.com. So yes, feel free. We really appreciate any follow and like you can. And yes, let's catch those Florida Panthers.
Yeah, dude. No, I appreciate that. And Dan, like, honestly, dude, like, I'm telling you, like, I had so much fun on this episode going through this insight. I think it's going to remind people of the original reason why they appreciated the tough guy. They're going to remember it. The talks that we got into, you having that soft spot for Sameko, that paved the way, man, for the rest of your life. Look at you now. You're running a site with 250. How much again?
255,000. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, and so the connection to Dave too, and I wish there's a couple of people in my life that I wish I could have met. One is Joey Moss, who was the old locker room attendant of the Edmonton Oilers, who passed away unfortunately.
God bless his soul.
Yeah, and Dave is definitely another one that the first thing actually that I ended up covering for Oilers Nation when I got hired by the Nation Network was Dave's memorial service actually. So that was there's a unique connection there as well for me. But yeah, it's I live a pretty blessed life. Like I said, or like you said in the bio there, the 15 years that I've now been in this industry, I've been afforded some pretty incredible moments. And I count this as one of them, Sean. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you. I hope we can talk again because
oh, yes, I was going to – oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say it's been a joy for me to be able to talk to the George LaRocques and the Ryan Reeveses of the world, but there is so many good dudes on this website that I want to be able to talk to, and I want to be able to share stories with, and be able to just be able to be friends with. And so yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's been fun to hear your ideas and your thoughts around this league that I can tell you love, and that you only want to see go better and do better as we go forward. Yeah. So yeah, I'm the number. You know my number now. We've been able to talk and break that ice. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, sir, and you stay safe. And thank you to all the listeners for checking out. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome, buddy. And I appreciate you being so nice, dude. And I'm gonna need you back because I'm telling you, man, I'm starting the panel. I'm starting the conversation. We're going to need like-minded people like yourself to be a part of this, man. And then all we do is we have to get support of some executives in the NHL that will listen to us. So I'm going to need you for a part 2 as well, brother.
100%. Anytime,
awesome,
Sean.
Buddy. So there you go. We'll end it now on a good note. And I want to thank the listeners for tuning in to another episode of The Sheriff featuring special guest Danny Gallant of hockeyfights.com. We appreciate you coming, brother.
Cheers, buddy.